It was supposed to be a formal symposium, a conversation between public figures, artists, legal scholars, and civic leaders on the intersection of law and culture. Chief Justice John Roberts sat on one side representing authority and tradition on the other was Denzel Washington, invited not just as an actor but as a public thinker, someone who had long spoken about justice, integrity, and power with piercing clarity. The conversation started politely. John asked Denzel about his influence in media. Denzel answered humbly, but the tone shifted when Roberts said, "You've played many legal roles on screen. But how much real understanding do you actually have of constitutional law?" The question was framed as polite curiosity but laced with condescension. The audience paused, waiting for Denzel's reaction. He didn't blink, instead offering a soft smile and a simple response. "More than you might assume," Roberts pressed further with a grin. "I doubt a few scripts and court scenes qualify." As legal education, Denzel nodded slowly. "True, but understanding law is about understanding people, and I've been studying them my entire life." The audience chuckled lightly, unsure whether it was a joke or a jab. Roberts kept going. "So, what's your take then on judicial impartiality in a politically charged case?" Denzel leaned in. "Judicial impartiality without moral clarity becomes indifference." Wrapped in robes, the room hushed. The Chief Justice looked stunned for a second before trying to redirect. "Well then, what would you say is the role of empathy in interpreting the Constitution?" Denzel answered. "When the Constitution was written, it excluded people like me. So yes, empathy matters unless we're comfortable applying injustice with perfect grammar." The air got heavier. People were no longer watching a panel, they were witnessing a duel. Roberts attempted to recover, saying, "Interpretation must be rooted in original intent. That's the foundation." Denzel shook his head respectfully. "Original intent also gave us slavery and denied women voices, so maybe the foundation needs checking before we rebuild on it." The crowd erupted in applause, not from sentiment, but from the shock of seeing someone calmly match the Chief Justice point. 4-point Roberts adjusted his posture, trying to maintain authority. "I'm not here for emotional appeals," Denzel replied. "No, you're here for truth. And sometimes truth is emotional. The legal system doesn't get to pretend it's sterile when its decisions break human lives." The moderator looked visibly overwhelmed as the panel spiraled into brilliance beyond its prepared script. At this point, Roberts' tone shifted from smug to stern. "This is not a film, Mr. Washington. This is the real world of legal principle," Denzel responded. "And principle without reflection becomes ritual, not justice. That's the real world I came from, not the courtroom." The audience leaned in. Roberts, now visibly challenged, said, "Then tell me what qualifies. You two critique the law." Denzel paused, then spoke. "I've sat with families who lost sons to bad policing. I've funded programs for youth who never made it to court because they were gunned down first. And I've played roles not to act, but to ask questions. So what qualifies me is not a degree, it's perspective. You can dismiss it, or you can learn from it." Roberts had no immediate reply. The silence that followed hit harder than any argument. The moderator tried to shift away from the sparring, but the crowd wanted more. The tension had become electricity. Someone from the audience asked, "Mr. Washington, how would you change the current legal system if you could?" Denzel took a breath and said, "I'd start by requiring every judge to spend 6 months working in a public school before ever stepping behind the bench, because justice is not born in law schools. It's revealed in the places the law forgets." The room went dead silent, then broke into applause. Roberts looked uncomfortable. The question had not been aimed at him, but the answer landed directly in his lap. He shifted again, tried to smile, but it did not reach his eyes. Denzel sat still, measured in tone, yet immovable in presence. The courtroom wasn't his, but the room certainly was. Clips of the exchange hit social media instantly. Some labeled it "the day Denzel schooled a supreme voice." Hashtags trended: Denzel vs. Roberts, truth in real time, masterclass. Some users edited the footage with dramatic background music, inserting slow motion when Denzel said original intent gave us slavery. Analysts from legal and entertainment backgrounds debated it for days. News networks replayed the clip in highlight reels. Professors assigned the dialogue to students in law classes. Panelists who had been on stage said afterward they had never seen a moment where calm rebuttal held so much gravity and power. And Denzel had done it without interrupting, shouting, or dismissing anyone. Just clarity, steady, and cold as glass. Later That week, Chief Justice Roberts was asked about the exchange during a brief press interaction. He chuckled stiffly and said, "I may not agree with everything," Denzel said, "but he certainly has a powerful way of saying it." Then he added softly, "and I think there's something to be said about how law meets lived experience that was as close to concession as a man in his position could offer." But for many watching, the symposium had already delivered its verdict. This was not just an actor showing. Up to impress, this was a man who knew the room, the weight, and the moment. And he used it to turn a challenge into a lesson that even the highest robes in the land couldn't ignore. Opinion writers flooded columns praising Denzel's poised restraint. And intellects some titled their articles "The Actor Who Judged the Judge." Others called him the voice the courtroom forgot. Legal experts acknowledged the strength of his arguments, saying he referenced historical precedent, contemporary policy, and social truth in a way that was hard to counter. More impressive, they noted, was his ability to dismantle elitism without ever sounding bitter. Every word had purpose. Every response was rooted in truth, not spite. He didn't debate to win. He responded to remind that justice without humanity is just a polished cage, and that message resonated far beyond that panel's students. Cross law schools quoted him in term papers. Activists reposted his statements as proof that the law cannot be discussed without acknowledging who it protects and who it punishes. Public defenders started using his words in training sessions. A few even said they had memorized his line about principle without reflection becoming ritual. It wasn't just a moment anymore. It was a turning point. Denzel had stepped into the room as a guest, but left it as a scholar, and he never claimed the title or demanded recognition. He simply spoke, and let the words do what words are supposed to do when spoken with integrity: challenge everything that pretends to be untouchable. In the end, it was not about embarrassing the actor or proving the judge wrong. It was about the illusion that wisdom only comes from official titles and elite institutions. Denzel Washington walked into that space as a guest and left having rewritten the script of power without shouting, without notes, without permission. He reminded a nation that brilliance is not always dressed in robes. Sometimes it's wrapped in humility, forged in lived experience, and delivered with such clarity that even those trained to rule the room can only listen. And in that moment when law and life collided, the actor became the teacher. The bench sat silent.